Welcome to Pop Up to Powerhouse, the podcast where side hustles turn pro. Here, we're pulling back the curtain on what it takes to build a standout, profitable brand in the event industry. From pricing with confidence to landing luxury clients, I'm sharing the wins, the setbacks, and everything in between, so you can turn your passion into a powerhouse business. Welcome back to another episode of Pop Up to Powerhouse. I am your host, Jamie Taylor, and we are in our new little studio space. If you follow me on social media, I kind of shared the behind the scenes of getting this set up because, to be honest with you, I'm starting out. I don't know. I'm not a huge professional with this, right? I don't know what I'm doing. But what I did know is that I didn't love the background. And so this room actually means a ton to me because it was the last project that I worked on with my dad. He actually helped me build these shelves. And so it was funny once I started decorating the shelves and putting stuff on there, I thought to myself, like, why wasn't this the first place that I thought of having a quiet place to record? So anyways, here we are. All right, so if you've followed along in this pivot series for the last few episodes, I've talked a lot about how I felt during that season of my life. And I've talked about how I was almost crying every single day. I was applying for jobs, trying to sell my business to a friend of mine, being over $100,000 in debt, and just honestly how mentally dark that season was for me. But I don't want to spend another episode talking about how bad I felt because that's not the point of this. Because eventually I did start to feel better. And I think that's what's probably more helpful at this point is talking about what I actually did to get myself out of that. Like, what did I change? What actually worked? Because looking back now, there was very specific things that I started doing that I really believed helped pull me out of that season. And the interesting part is I had no idea that there was actual research behind a lot of it. I wasn't following some perfectly mapped out plan. And honestly, I felt like I was really grasping at straws, just trying to figure out like how to get myself out of this. I was like, okay, something has to change because I cannot keep feeling like this. And researching this episode was actually really interesting for me because I realized a lot of the things I started doing actually have names for them. There are studies around them, and there are reasons they may have actually worked for me. So this episode is going to be a little bit more tactical, more of this is what I did, this is what worked for me, and here's some of the research that might actually explain why it worked. Because I think for me, I knew I could not wait for something to just change. I knew I needed to start showing up differently. And for me, that's exactly what I started to do. I started to change my actions before my feelings caught up with it. I didn't think my way out of it, I behaved my way out of it. And this doesn't have to be like, this is what I did and it's super structured. Like it felt very scattered and kind of chaotic, but now I'm kind of putting this all into a plan on what I did to get myself out of that because I think it's going to be really helpful for you. So one of the very first things that I did was I dove head first into personal development, like all in heads first. Like I was reading books, I was listening to all the podcasts, I started journaling, I downloaded all of the apps. The reason behind that is because I knew that I needed to start putting some like positivity into my brain because my brain was in these negative thought loops. And so I started listening to the Mel Robbins podcast. I mean, there's a ton out there that you can listen to, but I think that's the first thing. Like when you're in a negative spiral or in a negative thought, you have to start injecting some positive thoughts into your brain. And another one that I started using was the Growth Day app from Brandon Burchard. He was one of my favorite motivational coaches to listen to. And the reason I liked it is because he would do these little daily fires in the morning through his app. And they were just little 15, 20, maybe 30-minute motivational on various topics. And so I would listen to that every single morning, and that would get me into the right mindset for the day. And so I think it's so important to start out your day that way, especially when you're in a season of not feeling great, right? Like your brain just isn't in that mode of thought. So you have to start your day with some motivation. And one of the things I really love about Brandon Burchard that resonates with me, and I still tell myself to this day, is that You don't just magically get motivation. You have to summon your motivation. Like we don't always feel like we want to do something. You have to start making yourself do that. And those were some of the things that I started to do during this process and season of my life. I realized at some point the thoughts in my head were not serving me and they were not helping me. And I learned a term through Brandon Burchard and listening to it was that I was having these negative thought loops, right? Like my business isn't working. We're so much in debt. Maybe I should get a job. What am I even doing? I have no idea what I'm doing. Constantly thinking and overthinking. It was just a horrible spiral and negative thought loop that I was in. And at some point, I think I subconsciously realized if I keep listening to myself right now, I'm just going to keep reinforcing the same thoughts. So I needed to intentionally put something else in my brain, something positive, something that challenged me and challenged the way that I was thinking, something that made me think beyond my current circumstances and know that there was hope out there, that I wasn't going to be in this season of my life forever. Now, I want to be clear. I don't think listening to self-help books magically changes your life. We've all listened to a podcast and been like, oh my God, I'm changing my entire life. Like, right? You get like super hyped up. And then 45 minutes later, we're eating chips, sitting on the couch, and we've done absolutely nothing. So I'm not saying consuming more personal development content is the answer. But I do want to preface that I do think you have to start getting the personal development. And that's all I did in the beginning. I was like, just put some positive things into my mind. But in each one of those things that I was listening to, there's always some action, something that you can take and start doing. And at some point, I had read the books. Atomic Habits was an amazing book, developing better habits and creating more systems. Radical Confidence was another great book that I read, but at some point, I knew I needed to stop reading and stop listening, and I needed to start taking some actions. And one of the biggest realizations I had was that I desperately needed some structure. Like I was craving some consistency because the event industry, it can be an up and down roller coaster. Like you don't know when the events are coming. I just had basically been letting my days and weeks happen to me, right? Like an inquiry would come in, and so I would respond to the inquiry. We would have an install. So, and obviously, I would focus on the install, prepping for that and doing anything that was needed for the install. And as clients needed me, something that I would end up handling. So you just kind of waited for when things would come at you, and then I would handle them. I was really good at that, right? So you get, and I think this is applicable to anybody in any industry, right? Like you're waiting for the client to get a hold of you or something to happen. You're constantly reacting to what's happened instead of kind of taking a more proactive approach. And I don't think I realized it at the time, but my entire life had become incredibly reactive. I was really good at handling whatever was directly in front of me, but I had no systems for what to do when nothing was directly in front of me. And that's actually when I would spiral. Because if the inquiries weren't coming in, suddenly I had all of the space to think about how I had no inquiries coming in, right? We're not making any money. And I'd start thinking, business is slow. We're in debt. This isn't working. Other people are getting hired and I'm not. Maybe I need to go get a job. Maybe I'm really not that good at this. And before I knew it, I was 10 steps down the mental rabbit hole. And what I think I was actually craving was some sort of order. I needed consistency. I needed to wake up and know, Jamie, this is what we're going to do today. That was actually a clear thought that I had in my head. Like, I need consistency. And here's where I think my opinion is maybe a little bit different than all of the other morning routine content that we see online. I actually don't think the morning starts in the morning. I think it starts the night before. So the first thing that I started to do was I've always been a to-do list person, but I started creating my to-do list the night before. So before I would end the workday, I knew exactly what I needed to work on the next day. I was never guessing when I woke up that morning. But here is the difference. I started numbering my to-do list. 1, 2, 3, 4. You could go all the way down to 10 if it needed to. This was in order of priority. And I know that that sounds ridiculously simple, but I'm actually surprised at how many people have days and don't have a notepad or don't write anything down. Because here is what I used to do. I used to take all of the things that I would want to accomplish, whether it was like emails and goals and my website, like I would write down all these lists. And I wasn't really great at identifying like what really was like the most important over another. And so I found myself getting into and just feeling like at the end of the day, I was like, man, I did a lot of things, but I don't really feel like I accomplished anything. And so it just became really defeating and very burnt out. Like I was working my ass off and I wouldn't finish my list. And then I'd beat myself up because I didn't get enough done. So I'd move everything to the next day, and then you'd have 5 more things to put on the list. And I would continue to do that thing. I was just in this cycle of doing it. And I remember going on one of my walks one day, and I remember having this realization like, your to do list will never end, like ever. Right? You own a business. Your list is never going to be zero. Like there will never be a time in your business, like literally never, where there's nothing to work on. So why was I measuring the success of my day by whether I finished a list that was literally designed to never end? The goal couldn't be to finish the list. The goal had to be knowing what mattered most that day. And numbering my list forced me to decide that if I got only one thing done tomorrow, what needs to be the number one thing? And then what's the number 2 priority and what's the number 3 priority? And there's actual research around creating specific action plans and how that can increase the likelihood that we follow through. Again, I didn't know any of this and that there was research backed behind this. I just knew numbering my damn to-do list gave my brain somewhere to go. And instead of waking up and thinking about the entire business, I looked at number 1. So if you're listening to this and you're feeling completely overwhelmed by everything that you need to do, stop asking yourself, how am I going to get all of this done? And start asking yourself, what are the 3 most important things I need to do tomorrow to move my business forward? And decide that the night before. I'm going to go a step farther and tell you, if you want to get away from just working on tasks, because a lot of times that goes to working in your business, right? You're going to have emails to send, you're going to have invoices to do, you're going to have posts to make. And a lot of times what happens is you stop working on goals that you need for the day. So if you want to take this a little bit farther, is you will still create your tasks and to-do list that you needed to do. And those are your daily tasks. So number them out and get your top ones done. Like know what the priority is for the day and know that you have to get number 1, 2, and 3 done for the day. So make sure you allot the right amount of time to get those done. Then I started to I just use like a white notepad. It's nothing crazy, and like a legal notepad. And then on the right-hand side, I will write down my top goal for the week. And that goal is something typically working on the business, especially if I have a project. And this might not be all the time. You might not always have a project, but if you're like, hey, I want to start learning how to do ads on Instagram, right? Okay, so what are you doing throughout the week to accomplish that goal? And a lot of times that goal isn't really related to things that you need to do to bring business in. So the goal of having that one goal list, like by the end of the week, I want to have something checked off on my list of what that is. And so it makes it easier because it's like if you have that main goal, you can then figure out from that goal what are tiny tasks and how can you allot some time throughout your week to accomplish that project, and you're not just working on tasks and never able to work on some of the bigger goals that you have for your business. So hopefully that will help you kind of differentiate the difference between like the working in the weeds of your business and getting those tasks done, but then also adding in carving out time to work on projects for your business. So ones that I have for myself right now are actually learning how to do ads myself. And I also signed up for Jessie Jean's Yap Challenge. So in the morning, I am drinking my coffee and I'm listening to Jessie Jean's The Yap Challenge. I'm not perfect at it, but I want to get better at speaking camera to camera or face so that you guys can hear me and know that I have like these clear, concise thoughts that I have because I laugh because I'll go on a walk with my husband. I'm like, if I can just get out of what's inside my brain through my mouth, I have some like really stellar things to talk to you about. But sometimes it really is difficult verbalizing it. So those are some of the bigger goals and projects that I'm working on outside of what episode am I working on next. And then I also have my balloon business, right? So we're still working on logistics and clients, and I have a walkthrough. So numbering your to-do list, knowing what your major goals are, and writing those down and prioritizing them is crucial to not just feeling like you're constantly getting things done, but never really feeling like you're moving forward. So the next thing that I started to do, going even deeper into creating more structure in my business, is that I started to close my business down. And that was really hard for me. I never really turned work off and I felt like I had no balance, right? Emails came in, I answered them. And you just, especially when you're starting out, you're like super excited, like post on socials, you'll email clients, like you kind of drop everything and you have no boundaries. And that is a very dangerous way to start. And if you allowed yourself, you could work all the time and you could work yourself into the ground. And I think that there is a healthy balance with turning things off and creating that boundaries. For one, if you just have this like open-ended work day, you tend to be like working all day and like you could be maybe doing the dishes or going over here and doing this, and your day ends up becoming really prolonged. So if you don't have a focused time of work, like you think about like when you go to clean your house, right? You have friends coming over and you got 30 minutes to get that house cleaned up. And guess what? It gets clean and picked up in 30 minutes. That is because you're focused with that time. And you have to approach your business that way as well. You need to create times, you need to create boundaries. And I know in the beginning when you're starting, you just want to be on all the time because you're trying to generate income, generate more business and kind of get out there, and you are doing networking events. And there are times, even when you're not growing, that business is super busy and you're going to have to work more hours than maybe you typically would. But just try to set boundaries and set a work cutoff time. So mine was 6 p.m. I shut off and I separate and I walk away. And that is something I've really tried to do because I don't want my entire life to be my business. And there are people out there that that's what they want. Great. You have to decide what you want. And I knew for me, I wanted to have a life outside of my business. Quick pause before we jump back in. If you haven't downloaded my free guide yet, you're seriously missing out. If you're ready to stop undercharging and book those premium clients that you dream about, I made something just for you. It's my free Charge Your Worth guide. Inside, I'll walk you through the exact mindset shifts you're going to need and real strategies to move from side hustle to powerhouse brand. Download it for free at thejamietaylor.com/free guide and take the first step in building the brand and creative business that you deserve. And for me, I was $100,000 in debt at the time, so it didn't really feel like the right decision to make was to cut off work maybe when somebody would email. But I'm sure just like many of you, I also am a mom and you might be a parent. And if you don't cut off that time and you're not present with your kids, which I wasn't for many years, I felt like I was always thinking about work and it's still very difficult for me to do. But a lot of times you start this business to have more time with your family. So setting that 6 p.m. or whatever time works for you cutoff is so important to being present in your actual life. And there's actually something called psychological detachment from work. And basically, it's your ability to mentally disengage from your work during non-work hours so your brain can recover. And my brain desperately needed some recovery. I thought working until 10 p.m. proved how badly I wanted to save my business. But eventually I realized an exhausted version of me wasn't actually better at saving it. Okay, so now I've talked to you about how I've created some structure in my life. I have dove into personal development, and I wanted to take this just a step farther because I'm still mentally spiraling and staying in these negative thought loops. And so I would end my day at 6 p.m. I would spend time with my family. and then going back to a different type of morning routine. So I think that your morning starts the night before. How do you set yourself up for success the next day happens the night before. So having your to-do list, then started meditating. And I know this is a very difficult one for people because they're like, I could never sit there and not think about anything. And that's not what meditation is about. And I'm no expert at meditating, but I have done it long enough consistently to tell you what's worked for me. So at night, part of my nighttime routine would be to sit and meditate for 10 minutes. And I would just pop on some AirPods and I would put a Spotify peaceful meditation playlist on. And I would actually make it really loud. I didn't want to hear anything else that was going on. It's really helpful if you take the lights down, and I would meditate for 10 minutes. And in the beginning, it was really difficult to meditate because my brain, I had such a hard time shutting it off. And even though I was like so intently trying to like be calm, listen to my breath, listen to the music. That's why I had the music playing, was because it was calming, but I was really trying to listen to every like beat and noise that was like in that, or the music that was in there. And then I would still find my brain like wandering off. And in the beginning, I would kind of beat myself up for that. Like, oh my gosh, you can't just like shut up for a minute. But no, my brain couldn't. And over time, as I did this consistently, what I learned is instead of beating yourself up over your brain wandering off, you just kind of catch it and are like, oh, I wandered off there. And you try to bring it right back and you come back into listening to your breath and you go back into listening to the music. For me at this point, my brain was constantly on overdrive. So if you are anybody that maybe replays conversations in your head, creates fake future scenarios, making up stories in your mind about money, business, relationships, back to money, whatever it might end up being, if you are constantly overthinking, you need to meditate. And meditation became less about relaxing for me and more about exercising a muscle. My brain would wander off, and then, right, you bring it right back. And if it wandered again, I would bring it back. And you just continue to do this because for so long, you've been allowing your brain to just wander off and have whatever thoughts that it came to it. And now you're trying to control it on some level. And there is research around mindfulness and rumination. Rumination is basically those repetitive negative thought loops where you keep thinking about the same thing over and over again. And over time, I started noticing something, not just when I was meditating, but once I did this consistently during the day, I started catching myself when I would spiral and go into those negative thought loops. And sometimes I could literally see myself doing that. And I would say, nope, we are not doing that. And I would redirect my attention and I would come back into a present moment. What was happening is I was becoming more aware of the fact that I was wandering off or worrying about something. I spent years thinking and had zero control over my thoughts. And meditation started teaching me that I could at least practice where I put my attention. And it did actually help me turn my brain off. I mean, I was craving being present in the moment and not being so fearful and having anxiety of the future. So once I got done meditating, I started journaling every single night. And my journaling was nothing profound. I wasn't sitting there writing some like beautiful inspirational memoir. It was basically me putting my thoughts for the day out mentally on a piece of paper, right? Here's what I'm scared of. Here's what I'm dealing with. Here's what happened today. Here's what I'm worried about. I would write down, here are the things that went well. I just went back and looked at my previous journal. So I started journaling on December 9th, 2022. And in the beginning, I was journaling consistently, like every single day. And here and there, I've gotten a little bit less consistent with it. But one of the things I noticed was that my thoughts were almost the same day in and day out. But it was really therapeutic to get what was like, rummaging around in my head out and on a piece of paper. I mean, day after day, I was having the same thoughts. I was having the same fears, the same things that would send me spiraling. And journaling gave me that awareness to know like kind of the things that were actually triggering me and why that was happening. And at the end, I would write down 3 things that I was grateful for. But I tried to make them really granular because they have to. If you are writing something down every day, you can't say every day, like, I'm grateful for my family, I'm grateful for my health, I'm grateful for my business. You have to get really granular because they need to be different. And what's crazy is at that time, there were days where I didn't, in the beginning, could not think of what I was grateful for. But once I started doing it every day, I realized all the things I was taking for granted. I was grateful to have a warm cup of coffee. I was grateful for the sun. I was grateful to have the leisure to be able to go on a walk whenever I wanted to. I was grateful that I had food to eat that was on my table. There is a lot of research around gratitude and well being. And one of the things I do remember hearing is it's really hard to be anxious or be worried about things when you're grateful. And it's so true. But a lot of times when you're so focused on everything you're lacking and all the things that you don't have, it's really difficult to see all the things that you do have and all the amazing things that are actually happening. And for me, I had a lot of really amazing things. I just wasn't focusing on that. And it's such a tiny practice, but one that is really powerful if you can do it consistently over a period of time. Gratitude didn't pay off my debt and it didn't fix my business, but gratitude forced me to find what was working instead of what wasn't. All right, so now let's talk about the morning time. And if this seems overwhelming for you, guys, it really isn't. It might sound like a lot, but it was so systemized and it brought so much structure to my life that I really do think the combination of this is what really truly got me out of it. So now we're in the morning. I've already set myself up for success because I already know what I'm tackling for today. I have my to-do list and it's prioritized. But instead of just like jumping into work, instead of just getting on my phone and looking at social media, I completely stopped doing that. So I would get up in the morning, I would drink my coffee, and I would read some sort of self-improvement book. And I had mentioned Atomic Habits. I read Radical Confidence. There were so many out there that I've read. Marie Forleo's Everything is Figure Outable book, such a great book. But I would put something positive in my brain. Then I would go for a 30-minute walk. This is when I would listen to Brandon Burchard's Daily Fire, and that would get me kind of like motivated and amped up for the day. I would come home, I would get ready, and then before hopping into work, I would meditate again for 10 minutes. And a lot of times for this meditation, I would focus on who I wanted to be for the day. And I would also focus at this time, I didn't feel like a very strong person, but I would focus and tell myself, like, you are strong and you could do hard things. And so it could be as simple as that. You can say affirmations and mantras to yourself. Then after that, did buy Mel Robbins' Hi-Fi Challenge book, which I really did love. It was a very short way of somewhat journaling because you would kind of get out any worries that you had for the day, but then you would write down like what are some goals and things that you wanted to achieve. And it was so great because it was kind of getting you to dream again and look to the future for some good things that was happening. And then I would start work. But here's the important part. I didn't have to decide like what am I going to do today because my list was already there, numbered, prioritized, waiting for me. I had removed one more opportunity for my brain to wake up and look at everything going wrong and spiral. I wasn't trying to create the world's most aesthetic morning routine. I was creating a system that made it harder for me to fall back into my old patterns. And there's one other thing that became a huge part of this season for me: exercise. And this actually all started because of my anxiety. I remember feeling that feeling where my heart would start beating really fast, and it was all I could take. My body felt super anxious. My brain was on overdrive. And one day I basically decided that if my heart was going to beat this fast and I was going to feel this like labored, I wanted to be for something, not for nothing. So I threw on my tennis shoes and I went for a run. I knew I needed to get to some of this like pent up like energy and stress out. And so at first I started just going for runs. And then I decided to get a little bit more consistent with my workout. So I started going and working out 3 days a week and I started to lift heavy. And somewhere in that process, I started saying things to myself like, I remember standing in the gym going, I can do hard things because I hate working out. But I was like, you can do one more rep. I can do hard things. I can increase the weight, right? And just kept saying, I can do hard things. And I know that is an affirmation we've all heard a million times, but it started to mean something different when I was physically proving it to myself. I wasn't standing in front of a mirror saying, I'm strong, I'm strong. I was actually lifting weights, and that was translating to me mentally, right? Like lifting the weights and going like, I am strong and I can do this was it was empowering me mentally. And it was like, I can do hard things. Like, I am stronger than this. So, there's this concept in psychology called self efficacy. And basically, it's your belief in your own ability to execute or accomplish something. One of the ways we build that belief is through what's called mastery experiences, basically, actually doing the thing. So the gym started giving me physical proof of something I was desperately needed to remember mentally. I can do hard things. And yes, I physically felt stronger, but I also started feeling like a strong person again. So I want to go back to the self efficacy and having the simple belief that you can figure it out. And if you have not read Marie Forleo's Everything is Figure Outable book, it is amazing. But that's literally what it is. It's just knowing, have an innate knowing that like I can figure this out. And even one of the things I noticed, even with my installs that I had, was I had a negative thought loop that where I would worry about any and all the things that could go wrong with the install. And I felt like if I worried about them, that none of those things would happen. And most of the time, none of those things did. But eventually I realized, like, once I started researching all of this and understanding that there were terms to this and that this was normal, and that this was a thing, I noticed that I was having that thought loop with all of my installs and creating this like anxiety that I really didn't need. And then I had the realization that we have had issues, like we've had issues, right? Like things come up in business that you weren't expecting, and then you figure out how to solve them. And instead of continuing to worry about them before they even happen, what I started to do was when I would have those thoughts on like the way to an install or before an install, I would stop myself and say, you have always figured this out. We've never had a problem or a situation in an install that we did not fix and did not have a solution to. And what the difference was you stopped yourself from negative thought loops and spiraling. You stopped it right in its tracks. And so that is the power of realizing your thoughts, noticing them, and retraining your thoughts to something else. So that didn't mean that issues didn't come, but it just knew that innately I knew I can figure them out and I don't need to fester about it and I'll handle it. So I'm really excited because in the coming episodes, we are going to talk about how um, working out and how exercise can help you in your business, because we're sitting down with Desiree from West Coast Wellness. And we're going to be talking about health and fitness and the way that taking care of yourself can impact every other part of your life. So for me, fitness became about so much more than my body looking good. It had actually nothing to do with that. It became part of me rebuilding who I was and reaffirming those affirmations I was telling myself. Okay, so I ended up deciding to separate these two. Originally, this episode and the next one were going to be one, and I just felt like it was way too much to cover in one. So this episode is all about mindfulness, meditation, and personal development and creating structure and getting your brain right, because I think it's really difficult to actually put any tasks or skills into place when you're mentally not in the right frame of mind. So that is goal number one, is get some structure into your life. If you're struggling with anything right now, create that nighttime routine. Know what you're doing the next day. and then have a morning routine where you're pouring back into yourself. I am going to challenge you all to start a meditation practice. It does not have to be perfect, but if you're somebody that like overthinks and is just constantly worrying, and it's like your brain can never shut off, I am challenging you to meditate 10 minutes a day. That's all it takes. You can do it, and you're not going to be perfect at it first. Do not beat yourself up about it, but add that in, and you will see that what happens is that during the day, you're going to be able to turn your brain off because you're going to start exercising that muscle and teaching yourself to turn it off. And then add in some form of exercise, whether it's going for a walk, going for a run, lifting some weights. One of the things I'm excited to talk about in the episode with Desiree is about how you don't need some like 45-minute or an hour long workout. Cause I know, like myself, I am incredibly busy. And so it's difficult to fit in an hour, and that can be something that holds a lot of us back. So we're going to dive into some of the research that is behind shorter workout periods and trying to just get it in for the day and what that can do for you mentally. All right, so in the next episode, we are going to dive into some of the tactics and things that I did use to get my business back on track, stop being in a reactive frame of mind and waiting for things to happen, and how I took action and what I did with that, and also what I did to pay off $100,000 worth in debt in a year. Now, a quick ask. I want to keep bringing you these free educational podcasts so that you can build the event business that you want. You can make that possible by simply sharing this episode with your friend, following us on your favorite platform, and leaving us a review. It takes just a moment, and it makes sure that I can keep bringing you the best quality content so that you can go from pop-up to powerhouse.